Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
We have discussed before on our show the blatant anti Semitism in the California Ethnic Studies curriculum model, known as the Liberated curriculum. We have also discussed the efforts to eliminate or tone down the purposely included anti Semitism. It's time to revisit the topic with our guest today. Dr. Williamson Evers is a senior fellow at the Independent Institute and director of the Center on Educational Excellence. He was the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Education for Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development from 2007 to 2009, and he has advised numerous office holders and candidates over the years. Dr. Evers, Bill, welcome to our show and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with talking about, could you briefly describe the anti-Semitism that is included in the Liberated curriculum?
Well, I think you sort of have to start with the origins of the Liberated curriculum. So, if you think about it, back in the 1960s, specifically in 1968, people began to be interested in ethnic studies. And we had in California a student strike at San Francisco State. So this was again in 1968. And one of the demands of the students, this is how S.I. Hayakawa became an important politician and so forth. It was a nationally covered student strike. So one of their demands was to have a College of Ethnic Studies. The intent of this, one of the groups of strikers is called the Third World Liberation Front. And their view was that ethnic groups in the United States that they considered oppressed, so that meant Blacks, Latinos, American Indians or Native Americans, and Asians, would form some kind of united front and they would overthrow the society. So we wouldn't have a commercial society, we would have some kind of socialist utopia and all ethnic groups would be in blissful harmony. And so they wanted to have this studying of these groups, not just to learn about the groups, but to shape them to be this revolutionary vanguard that they wanted to see change America, transform America. So they had professors that got appointed to this, and over time, professors graduated people who became teachers in K-12. And so they began pushing to have courses in this in the schools. So Los Angeles has had this for quite a while and so forth.
We're talking K through 12 schools now.
K-12, we're really, some of it begins early, but in terms of the law in California, it's a high school requirement.
Okay.
The liberated people start early. I mean, they're doing this in kindergarten, okay? But we can get into a little bit. It's immensely complex. So I beg of listeners and people watching to focus and stay alert because it's quite complicated. All right. So I have this ideology, and where do Jews fit in this? Well, Jews, according to them, are part of the oppressive white supremacy. And, you might be startled. I mean, what group has been more oppressed and more traduced and had more horrible things done to them than the Jews? I mean, it's just kind of crazy to think of them as this. But anyway, the ideology of these people is that their Jews are either whites or white adjacent, which just means like practically white, whatever their skin color is. So they also push Asians into this often. So Jews are part of the oppressor group. So now you start to have all the tropes of historic anti-Semitism. Jews are business leaders. Jews are in foreign policy positions of various sorts. the United States is allied with Israel in certain respects, maybe not formally, but certainly in fact. And there's the Arab-Israeli conflicts and all the foreign policy entanglements of the Middle East and the U.S.'s stance in this. And these people they don't like to make distinctions. They like to interconnect everything. So they, in the guise of teaching about the history and current situation of ethnic groups, they have imported their revolutionary ideology, and they've also imported the foreign policy problems of the Middle East and specifically the situation of Israel. Now, if you talk among Jews in the United States, they all have one or another opinion about Israel. And if you go over to Israel, there's a ton of different political parties. They change, they disappear, they merge. There's a lot of people have demonstrations. I don't like what's plans for the judiciary. I have this view on foreign policy that's slightly different from yours. There's always jokes about you get 3 Jews in a room, there's 5 opinions, whatever. So it's not that no one can level criticisms about Israel's policies or particular governments, of course. The question is, are people singling out Jews in a way that they wouldn't criticize the Egyptian government, the Lebanese government, the Jordanian government, Syria, if it has a government, so forth, and somehow fastening on Jews as somehow diabolical, somehow, just like programmed to be evil in some way. I mean, this was the National Socialist German view. It wasn't that they thought Jews were inferior. It was actually that they thought Jews were superiorly clever in a dangerous way. So anyway, so this sort of view, that same view that I just described that German National Socialists is having, it also starts emerging. And so you just saw at UCLA and Columbia in the time since October 7th, you saw the demonstrations, the blocking Jews from going to class. This is a Jew-free zone, or this is a Zionist-free zone, or whatever. So this is really horrible, and a denial of people's normal human rights, and of course targeting Jews. So this is creeping into the classroom. So the state law said, we're going to have ethnic studies, and it's going to be a requirement to graduate from college. So
from high school.
From high school, sorry, to get.
Okay, yes, just checking. Yes. In California.
In California, and that was just a verbal misstep on my part.
No, I just wanted to. Okay.
Yes. So to graduate from high school, you had to take at least a semester-long course in ethnic studies. So the California Department of Education put together a group of teachers, like these teachers at San Francisco State that I was talking about, and some high school teachers that had been teaching this already. And they came up with this curriculum. And it had all these things about Jews being white adjacent, Jews being part of the problem of oppression in the United States, Jews being integral to capitalism, Jews oppressing Arabs, and therefore the Arabs come to the United States and they're traumatized, and all these things. And they put that in. And of course, so many people criticize this first draft of the ethnic studies, including me. I criticize it for many things, and Jewish groups, of course, criticize it. But lots of people, the Sikhs, criticize it. I mean, lots of people criticize it. Wasn't uniquely Jewish, but Jews had obviously strong views on this. So politicians, including the politicians that initially called for this to be a requirement, started saying, whoa, this is not quite what we wanted. So the state's Department of Education said, okay, we're going to pause this. We're going to, re-examine all this. So underlying this again is critical race theory. So this is the idea that it's connected to that idea about the different ethnic groups that we're going to bring about socialism in the United States. So the idea of critical race theory is look at everything through the prism of race. Everything is all institutions in society, all transactions, all power relations are all race. Okay. And it's either you're part of the group of oppressed races or you're part of the group of oppressing races. And they've put Jews into the oppressing group. So this, of course, is way oversimplistic. But anyway, that's what they have. So the California State Department of Education had this initial draft, and they took it and they took out some of the things that were in it. They took out the most overt anti-Semitism stuff. They took that out. They took out, it originally held up as heroes and exemplars, Puerto Ricans who had shot up Congress, various left-wing black nationalists and black socialists like Black Panthers, including Huey P. Newton, Eldridge Cleaver. These are people that, people today maybe have not heard of, but anyone my age who was around in the 1960s remember these people completely well. Angela Davis, who was was on various Communist Party presidential tickets. She was a college professor in California teaching philosophy, but she was, in the Communist Party. You're quite a left-wing person. And she was involved in a case called the Marin County Courthouse shootout. Anyway, the point is, I had all these radicals. They took them out, the state, but they left everything else. All the critical race theory ideas are in there. So the people that had done that first draft said, oh, you denatured this. You took our story out. You've took the most important details out, including the stuff about Jews and Israel and so forth. And we're going to secede from working with the state, and we're going to form our own collaborative, which is going to be called the Liberated. And we're going to have the original draft that we wanted, and we're going to sell that to districts. So they have a couple of dozen school districts that have this, and they push it. Some of it's online, but they push it through consultants who come in and hold hands with the teachers and the school district to put this in.
Why does the state allow it?
The state allows any curriculum. The state does not dictate curriculum.
You mean the state just says you must have a semester?
Yes, that's right. You can have, it offers a model curriculum. This is the one that I described, where they took that original curriculum, took out the most incendiary examples, the most overt anti-Semitism. But the other people can go to San Francisco or San Diego or Santa Ana. The most egregious case is in Santa Ana, where they have these consultants and they're using the Liberated version. The staff and some of the school board people there were privately communicating to have hearings on this on Jewish holidays, so Jews could not attend the meetings and comment and make objections if they had objections and so forth. So, I mean, think about that. How many people would be doing something like that? That's pretty horrifying.
And so totally legal.
Well, I don't know. It's probably not legal to deliberately hold a meeting on a Jewish holiday so that Jews cannot attend, I would say. So anyway, so I wrote several articles in the Wall Street Journal criticizing the different drafts that had come out. This initial draft that's now called the Liberated Curriculum, And then the state board approved draft, which I also felt was, it was still critical race theory, and it was still easily open to teachers importing stuff about Israel, about Jews into the curriculum, even though it didn't formally have it. They could use the categories that remain and easily import the lessons, their own or whatever. They could easily do this, and we've seen some of that going on.
And which year since when is this offered to teachers?
So right now, schools are piloting. That means they're experimentally trying out some of this. Some individual schools or districts might completely generate their own. They might choose the liberated curriculum. They might choose the board curriculum. So I'd written these Wall Street Journal articles, and I kind of was thinking, well, Bill, you can complain all you want, but teachers need an alternative. And, so I decided I raised some money, and I decided to work with a professional curriculum person who had I have a PhD in political science, but this person had a teaching credential and had done many curricula in the past. And so together we created, I'm holding up this fat thing, which is, so those who are just listening, it's a fat spiral binded thing, and it's online. You can easily find it on our website. It's called the Comparative Cultures Ethnic Studies Curriculum. Our website is independent.org, and you can easily find it there. It's right on.
I just want to clarify. This can be used to fulfill the ethnic studies semester requirement.
That's correct. It has all the topics covered, really, that the other people cover. Plus, it has Europeans in it, and it has Jews in it. And, Jews are treated in an even-handed, fair way. So I have my political views, but this is a centrist, middle-of-the-road curriculum. It's something that Democrats or Republicans could easily feel comfortable with. It's not tendentious or biased. And it's deliberately designed to be something that liberals and conservatives could both feel comfortable with. It's not trying to push one, and it holds debates on controversial things. So let's say there's controversy over big city policing, or there's controversy over affirmative action, or there's a controversy over whether people can best rise striving and in terms of individual effort and entrepreneurship, or whether they need political help and political organizing and government. All these disputed matters in ethnic studies, the big ones, we have organized debates where the kids, dig into it and present what their findings are and so forth. So it's meant to be factual. It's also meant to be balanced, and it's free. Nobody has to pay anything, and so I think it's a good alternative.
And it's not woke, is what you're basically
It's not
saying.
woke. That's right. That's right.
And so is it already being experimented with in certain schools?
Schools are definitely looking at it. Last week I was in the school board where they're in their first stage of adopting it. So schools are definitely looking at it. So they have sort of stages. First, they can have this time right now where they can pilot this. Then they have to offer it, and then in the subsequent year, in order to graduate from high school, you have to have taken it. So our curriculum has enough in it that if you wanted to have a year-long course, you could do it that way. It's designed to be expandable also. So, in terms of covering Jews, it talks about Jewish identity, it talks about religious Judaism, it talks about secular Judaism, it talks about anti Semitism quite thoroughly, and it also talks about Jews and civil rights, both the civil rights of Jews and the efforts of Jews to help other people achieve their civil rights.
I noticed just,
So
oh,
so
go
so
ahead.
so so um the liberated curriculum, the state curriculum, your curriculum. Since when is ethnic studies really taught in California schools, and in what districts do we have the liberated version now?
Well, actually have a list somewhere here. I don't know if I can find
But
it.
since when is it taught?
Well, it's been taught for a while. I mean, Los Angeles has had this for a long time. Um,
A long time is like,
Maybe 7 years, something like that. I don't
okay,
know. It's been around. Okay,
yeah.
so this it, it's interesting that so one of the reasons that people say they want to teach this, you think we have a pretty full curriculum already, and the kids they're not learning to read, calculate, learn history, learn science. Why are we adding this? So part of it is, the ideology of the proponents, but part of it's also how do we interest children in school? And so
Hmm.
some people believe, and they point to some empirical evidence. Other people say that their facts are wrong or they're interpreting it wrong. But anyway, their idea is if you have a course that includes something about your ethnic group, then that will spark your interest and maybe you'll do your math homework. Come to school, it'll improve attendance and so forth. So that's part, it's the idea is that it will improve enthusiasm for schooling in general,
Hmm.
and that also this course itself will attract interest.
Hmm.
So that's the rationale for it. Anyway, it's state law. I mean, they could repeal the law, but my view is let's get the best thing we can. Um, Also, my lessons are detachable. You could use the state board curriculum, and then in certain topics, you could use mine, or you could use mine, and then in certain topics, you could use the state board one, or you could use a liberated one. You can mix and match.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
so ethnic studies is being taught now for 7 years. If I
well,
understand you well, it's not.
but not in every district. It's in a few a few districts. It's been caught for a while, but now increasingly it's going to be. Eventually, it will be taught in every high school,
Yeah.
public high school,
In
and
California.
that includes charter schools also.
Okay. And where is the liberated version? The original revolutionary, let's remake our society into a
Unfortunate,
race. uh,
unfortunately, I don't have my list. I have a list of that, but I don't have it in front of me.
Do
Okay.
they have to?
I do know that I mentioned Santa Ana, which is right near Disneyland in Orange County. And that's a big school district.
Hmm.
San Diego, Berkeley.
Do they have to report to the state which curriculum is being used?
I don't believe they are required to do it, but they have to do it, and the state can audit them in some way to see that they're fulfilling the requirement.
I'd like to ask you a sentence that you wrote yourself, which goes with what you said, that the official curriculum, quote, wants students to adopt and use the woke concept of intersectionality.
Aha.
And I think we should mention that word too in terms of what's being taught.
Okay. So delighted to talk about this. So both the liberated and the board thing make extensive use of this idea. So it's not something that you probably use in your everyday life. But think of multiple categories. So here you go: race, class, gender identity, which might be different from biological sex, gender expression, which might be clothing and behavior styles, sexual orientation, so that's sex acts and romantic things and so forth, ethnicity, country of origin, disability, age, immigration status, mental health, including trauma, said to be coming from being in a capitalist society, physical health, body shape, and religion. So that's 14 things. So they want to take everybody and have those 14 categories, describe them. And then they want to rank people according to who is supposedly most oppressed using all these categories. And then they want to make decisions in society about who gets resources. So let's say we have a plague or an epidemic or something like that, and the government is giving out medical equipment or treatment or shots or something like that. Well, they want the most oppressed to be at the head of the line. Or let's say the government is giving out contracts to build solar equipment, solar energy things of some sort. Then they want the people that get these contracts to be decided not on maybe who could best build this stuff, but who is the most oppressed according to this. Now, of course, the problem if you have all these things that I listed,
14.
Yeah. Well, let's say you took just 10 of them. Okay, so you'd potentially 3,600,000 different ways to rank them. Well, of course, that's ludicrous, right? Nobody can even conceive of anything like that. And so to either use that or to teach that as a way to understand. So let's say a chemistry slot opens in K-12. They were looking for a chemistry teacher. Well, how do they decide between, how do they decide between a 31-year-old Native American gay man who is deaf and a heterosexual Latina middle-aged woman who has severe long COVID? I mean, this is the way they want to try and make decisions. It's crazy. Why not the best chemistry teacher who knows chemistry and can convey it to the students
in an engaging way?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't. So both the Liberated and the state board people have this. They both have also putting down Asian Americans. So the idea is, well, Asian Americans have been kind of grabbed by the whites as some kind of people that are complicit in white supremacy, and Asian Americans are white adjacent, just the same thing they accuse Jews of being. And instead of saying, well, maybe in Asian American culture, or some would say in Jewish culture, there's a trait of families wanting their kids to study in school. And it's possible that the achievement of Asians is not because some kind of racial conspiracy. It's because they work hard. And here are people who had exclusion acts against them, who had in California laws against land ownership that didn't get ended until the early 1950s. In the case of Japanese, you had internment during World War II, which was not a good thing. And yet, by 1970, Japanese Americans had higher incomes than whites. So, I, I think despite the bad things that have been done to Jews and the bad things that have been done to Chinese and to Japanese Americans or whatever, people are surprisingly resilient, and our society is often an open one. and we have constitutional rights, and we have legal protections. And, in spite of that, the bad things still do happen. And there are mobs and there are individual people who attack synagogues or whatever they do.
Let me, as we come to the end of this
Sure.
Really interesting talk, and before I give you a chance to say last words, can you give a call to action to what our individual listeners can do to push back against this liberated curriculum that's 14 categories, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I think what you should do is, if you're in California, you should go to your school board and say, what's going on with ethnic studies? What have you adopted? Have you adopted the state board with this crazy intersectionality, or the liberated with the anti-Semitism and the intersectionality? I think also two things you could use to kind of give yourself intellectual ammunition. So I'm holding up a recommended reading list that I've drawn up that you can also find on the Independent Institute website. You have to probably find me, or you have to get in there and write readings on anti-Semitism.
Well, no, we'll give a link to make it as easy
Sure.
as
What's the
possible.
title? What's the title?
Readings on anti-Semitism.
Okay.
So it's annotated. So it's like articles and books, and then little quotes from either those articles or somebody reviewing those articles or me summarizing those articles. And also, my institute has recently published this book. This is by a brilliant scholar who's an expert on this. The book is called The New American Anti-Semitism: The Left, the Right, and the Jews by Benjamin Ginsberg. And I've read it cover to cover. And he is he's a professor at Johns Hopkins, and he's written a ton of stuff in political science in the past. So it's a great thing. I also, if you want to compare, you can go to independent.org to get the curriculum to look at it. It's easily shown by chapters in it what the section is on Jews. And you can, if you're Jewish or you're interested in making sure that Jews get a fair shake, you can compare what's in this one on the Jews and what's in the other curriculums. And that will give you, you can obviously compare the other topics too, but if you're interested in Jews in particular, you can look and compare, and that, you'll see before your eyes what is the best approach.
So if each of us who are listening want to help stop this
It's in other
anti-Semitic
states. These things are in other states. I mean, Minnesota, there was a column in the wall during the last presidential campaign. One of the candidates was a governor of Minnesota. And so the topic of how is ethnic studies being taught in Minnesota came up, and somebody wrote in the Wall Street Journal, sounded exactly like liberated ethnic studies in California. So this is not just in one state. It's out there in the political culture. We have the internet now. People can borrow good ideas and bad ideas. So please borrow my good ideas and displace the ones that are inaccurate.
So each of us can look into the programs that are being taught in ethnic studies.
Yes.
We can find better alternatives and go to our school boards and advocate for that. Okay.
Exactly. And
how is that with I haven't gone to school here. I grew up abroad, but how is that in private schools? Does this also do they also have to teach ethnic studies?
They don't have to, but some may, and they should do a good job too. It's so in school board meetings, if something is on the agenda, the public has a right to talk. It might be only for a few minutes, but of course you can have a lot of people and each give their few minutes. Also, generally in school boards, everything is different state by state, but certainly in California, you can speak on an unagendized item also. You just have to put a card in, saying, I want to speak on this and during public comment. And so there are ways to make your voice heard. You can write columns in newspapers. You can write letters to the editor. Obviously, the internet has a multitude of ways to express yourself. But I do ask you to be accurate. So if you're going to say something is bad, make sure you cite things and just try and be better than your opponents in terms of saying what's going on and what would be better.
With that, do you have one or two final sentences? Although I think that's really important what you just said. Instead of calling names about things, you actually give facts.
Right. It's better not to label your opponents unless it's, absolutely necessary. It's best to just say, we want what's best for our children. We want accurate history. We want accounts of the past and of the current situation that are both give them further knowledge, make them better informed, but also allow peaceful coexistence between the different groups that are out there in our society.
That's a really beautiful way to end. Peaceful coexistence. I thank you, Bill, so much for coming on the show. I thank our listeners for listening. And if you want to know anything more about Evelyn and myself and our other activities, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast at YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And as we end every episode, we say, please speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.